Holy Kool-Aid, how do you feel about getting into a caller?
I'm so down. Let's do this.
All right. Let's talk with Lewis. Him from New York. Lewis, you are live on Talk Heathen. It sounds like you want to talk about um question about moral progress and in groups. Tell us a little bit more about your position.
Hey there. Yeah, so I've been thinking about this question. Like if we often rightfully criticize religious moral systems for restricting moral concern to their own in-group, right? If moral progress has historically expanded beyond those boundaries to include groups like women and the trans community, why should species membership be a boundary at all?
I'm not sure exactly what the question. Are you saying why shouldn't we talk about things like veganism as well, or are you saying that we should bring animals to the table to join in the conversation?
Well, obviously not bringing animals into the table to have conversation, right? Because they can't, right? But
Hmm.
for moral consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not, and I think there's a lot of content creators within this sphere that have addressed, animal rights and stuff. It's one of those things where if you're making videos about moral philosophy, absolutely, I see it as something worth talking about. If you're making videos about religion, sure, there's some overlap. I don't see why you can't talk about it, but I also, you know, people have different areas of focus and different priorities.
Yeah, well, I mean, not me. I'm saying we as a community, like atheists and skeptics, right? Which would include you.
Mhm.
Do you think that
Yeah.
you should consider expanding your circle of moral consideration to other species?
I think yes. Here's the situation though, Lewis. And so when we talk about the broader atheist community, right? I think there are a lot of people in the community doing this, and where animal rights are kind of their niche and their battle that they're going to the front lines about. Here's the problem though, like, and it's not a problem with the moral argument itself. I think that ultimately, yes, animal rights need to be a consideration if we're going to be ethical people, right? But here's the problem as far as dedicating our time and energy to certain activist efforts. We only have a limited amount of time, a little bit of limited amount of influence, and limited amount of expertise. So each person has to make a decision about what fights they're going to specifically go to battle for, right? And so a lot of times that's, even if we wanted to undertake all of these different avenues, it would actually dilute the advocacy efforts that we would make, because you're trying to spread yourself too thin. Like if I decided that I needed to add this extra big focus on veganism and animal rights, like while those are good things, I need to be in the trans space right now. Like right now, there are people that are being oppressed, particularly immigrant groups, particularly trans people, people that don't fit in with who are seen as kind of the majority, if you will. And so there's lots of different efforts that need to be seen, and even we can say yes, this is an important issue without having to completely derail the content that we're already making. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense, and I completely agree with the sentiment. I was more referring not to like you necessarily advocating for this on your show, but I'm just saying like in your personal life, in our personal lives, do you think it should be a good idea to like expand that circle to not exclude other species? I'm not saying that you should necessarily advocate for that, but just like in our own personal lives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who've touched on this. Peter Singer, notably among them, talking about the expanding circle of morality. How throughout history we've had these ideas about morality. Initially, we cared mostly about our family, our core group of kin, the people who we're related to, who are most likely going to be able to pass on genes that we share with them. So, in a way, it's the genetic material that we carry is being passed on by our siblings or by our children, our nephews and nieces. And so those are the people who we care the most about, we protect the most, because the people who don't do that, their genes die out. As we grew as a species, and we're a very social species, we found that societies that looked after their own group beyond just kin tended to fare better than ones who were, eating each other alive, not cannibalism per se, but as a matter of speech. And then that has expanded out more and more to now where we live in a global interconnected society. The circle of morality has expanded beyond that. And now Singer and others like Alex O'Connor have argued for expanding it out to include animals and species that are not human. So I think that there are very solid arguments to be made. I think that there's a strong case to be made for not just veganism but animal rights in general. As far as whether or not I'm going to speak about it on my channel, again, I know that's not exactly what you're getting at, but I think that oftentimes within the atheist community or the skeptic and the activist communities, we want everyone to talk about every cause all at once. And think that from the standpoint of impact measurement, of how much impact can I personally have on the world, there are some ways that are better than others. And yes, we could have everyone talking about every issue, but for me, there's a lot of issues that I care about that I think that are good issues and fights worth having. Like LGBT rights is one of them, and I have mentioned it on my channel, but I'm by no means an expert in this area. And I know that if all of a sudden my channel is talking about concerns related to LGBT issues, it's talking about veganism, it's talking about politics, it's talking about the importance of breast cancer awareness, all of a sudden my core message starts to become diluted. And I think that there's ways where like I can lean into my expertise and my specialty to really reach a bigger audience, to change, for example, people's minds surrounding things like whether or not the Bible is literally true. And as they start questioning those dogmas, maybe they start becoming more open-minded in other areas like LGBT rights. So it's a matter of like, where am I going to have the biggest, most important impact overall? That's hard to measure. But in terms of my own personal life, yeah, I do think about these things.
Yeah, that's great, and I think, I mean, that's really kind of my point, right? I certainly didn't, I'm not expecting you guys to, have this focus, whether in your own channels or in this channel on, the topic of veganism. That wasn't my concern. I do have like a final thought, and I'm just wondering what both of your position on this is, or what your thoughts on this is. Like, what should be the grounding for moral consideration? Should it be sapience or sentience? What would be a better grounding for like moral consideration?
Ben, you want to take this one?
Honestly, I don't really care about that far into philosophy. The fact is, like, I get, Louis, you're coming from a great place of like wanting to do the absolute like best thing for everybody at all times. That's awesome. I'm in a situation right now where like me, like being part of a minority group that is actively under fire, I don't have a lot of luxury of thinking about how can I maximize like ethical perfection in my life. Like there's so many things that have greater utility to demand my attention. And like, yeah, I would love to be in a place where everybody is so well taken care of that we can really dig into this philosophy. But honestly, like I'm so stretched thin with just trying to say out to the world, like I deserve to live with rights. I deserve healthcare, like those kind of things that like I don't know, Lewis, if you're part of any community that's particularly under fire right now, but like, and I'm very happy that you're able to think about this stuff. But for a lot of us right now, we are just surviving, and this is not really the time for us to get that deep into it. So my response is I don't really care right now, and I apologize.
And your co-host, does your co-host have a thought on that?
I mean, I would say in general, my approach is I want to minimize suffering. And I personally care a lot less about the suffering of, say, a shrimp that has one single neuron throughout its entire body compared to something like a dog. If I see someone, beating a dog on the side of the street, I'm going to care more. I have more qualms personally about eating bacon than I do about eating, poultry. But that said, I do think that it comes down to, ability for an animal to suffer. But again, there we do our best as we are able, and I think, as Ben pointed out, like, there's times in our lives where it's like, yeah, things are going great and we can kind of take more of this stuff into consideration, and then there's times when, like, you're literally like fighting just to keep your head above water. And so I don't see the animal rights cause and the vegan cause as bad. I don't see it as something that's not a conversation worth having. But I think right now we're engaged in fights that are more close to home.
Okay, look, I appreciate your openness to discussing this and your responses. I do understand them. I just want to make sure that I'm sensitive to your concerns, and I think they are definitely concerns. So I appreciate your time on this, and I would just encourage you guys to, when you have some more time, to think about this issue a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and it's not that I haven't thought extensively about this issue. I stopped eating meat for years, specifically because of the moral arguments. And then I went through a phase where, like, my mental health was in the toilet. I was going through a lot of stuff, and I started traveling again, and I was just like, there's so many things that I am stressed about and worried about. And trying to find, a good, healthy, clean source of protein while I'm on the road in other countries is just not one of the extra mental burdens that I wanted to continue taking on. So I think we do our best as we can. And I'm no moral exemplar. I'm not going to claim that I have the moral high ground on everything, but, yeah, I do think about these things.
Yeah, and to give another comment on that, like, I think there is, like, yeah, there's definitely like a lot to say about uh, animal rights being a very, very important issue. Um, and to Thomas's point, this fact that, like, oftentimes perfection is the enemy of the good, and there are a lot of us who want to be as ethical as possible in every way, and I think that's a reasonable uh, aspiration. I don't think it's attainable, and I think that a lot of people are going to be prone to some mental health trouble because of that. Because when you get into this thing of, I can't do all these things, I'm like, there's at some point where you're going to act unethically, and it's just inevitable. And as much as I don't want that to happen, like, you can't be a perfect person, and so it's okay to, like, especially right now, have some time and think, I'm doing the best I can with my energy level, with my resources, and all that. Um, so again, like, I don't think it's a bad thing to talk about, but I do think it's harmful to constantly seek perfection when it's unattainable.
Hmm.
So I just wanted to weigh in with that little piece.
Oh no, I appreciate that, and I definitely there's nothing about my position that says that we can be perfect, right? That's not the vegan position at all, of course. So yeah, no, I completely agree that perfection is something that is unattainable for humans. But I think also what both of you guys seem to indicate is that we should try to do our best, right? And I would argue in the most honest way we can, right? Do the best we can in the most honest way.
Hmm.
Any other
Does that sound?
thoughts on that? Or
Does that?
because I mean, we could dig into that honest. We could dig into that. What do you mean by the honest way? Do you think that our
Yeah,
way is less honest, or
no,
what would you say?
I'm not. Yeah, no, I'm not accusing you guys of being dishonest or anything like that. But I'm just saying, for like, even for myself, right? Like, I had lots of rationalizations when I first was approached with this idea of including animals in my moral consideration. So that's really what I'm talking about, is like these rationalizations that I and many people use to try to continue with like habits that we have been culturally conditioned into accepting. And so that's really what I meant by honest, like in the most honest way we can. That wasn't accusatory of you guys.
Mm,
Gotcha.
cool. Well, I
Anything
can't.
else from Holy Kool-Aid?
Not for me. No, I'm ready to move on to the next call. But I can't see if we have a lot of calls waiting to that we need a rush to get to, or if we have none and we need people to call in and drag out this conversation. So,
No.
uh, but I'm ready to move on to
uh,
whatever topic you guys want.
all right, Lewis. Anything else from you on this?
No, that's it. Just I think I've made my points, and I appreciate you being open-minded on this. And yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks
Have
for
a good
calling.
day, Lewis.
Take care.
I think
All right.
he's got a good point.
Yeah.
It's just that, like, one thing that I noticed, I mean I've been doing this full time for 10 years, is that oftentimes within the activism community, we really, really want to be morally perfect because, and we're all fighting for causes. The problem is that we get pulled in so many different directions, and then we make these dividing lines where our groups become smaller and smaller and smaller. And you have some people that are like, you're not, doing this right. You're not doing this right. You should be speaking up on this issue. You should be, a vegan, or you should be this. And we're getting eaten alive. There's so many issues that we're losing the ground on. And if we instead were able to, like, find points of common ground and unity to unite around and be like, yeah, there's going to be people in our community that have differences of opinion, but what can we coalesce around?
Yeah, and I saw a comment in the side chat, like, completely straw manning my point. Uh, they're claiming that I said that we can't be perfect, so we shouldn't even try. That's not at all what I was saying. But honestly, there are some points of this discussion that I find a little bit infuriating because, like, I'm very happy that there are people out there who have so much time and brain power to dedicate to a variety of different causes. I lost my job recently because I'm trans. Like, there are people out there who are losing healthcare right now because they're trans or because they're an immigrant. Like, people are being harassed. There's violence happening to people because of who they are. And
Mm,
so to say that people like me should just find time, find the
mm,
ability to add on this extra thing. And I'm not saying it's not important, but it's a
yeah.
little bit. It seems just a little bit lacking tact, I guess, to say, yeah, I get that you're under fire, but what about this other thing? And, like,
Mm,
you don't know the suffering that humans are going through right now, or it seems like you're
yeah.
unaware of the reality that a lot of people are having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And if you're in a situation where you have to decide, do I put food on the table or do
Mm,
I champion this issue today? Like, sure, you get to make that choice for yourself, but that has to be a personal choice. And
yeah.
I don't think that shaming people that they're not ethical enough because they're eating meat is, like, I don't think that's effective. And I don't think that's the way to. I think we need to improve systemic things before we get into. I mean, like, not saying it's insignificant or that people shouldn't be doing things individually, but there are bigger systemic things that need to change before it is
Yeah.
reasonable for a lot of people. So,
Yeah. I'm sorry about your job. That fucking sucks. But I think, and I don't think that Lewis specifically was going on the offensive in that way. It didn't come off to me that way, at least. But I do completely agree that, like, there's been times in my life when, I've been struggling to get through, and it's like, if you're just trying to kind of make it through the day, and you're struggling financially, and you're struggling with all these other issues, and now you have to, like, check every single package and every single restaurant, and where can you eat and where can you not eat and what can you do. It's an extra burden that I think that, when you're in the headspace where you can focus on that stuff and you can dedicate mental resources and you have the spoons for it, then absolutely, sure, like, consider this stuff, look into it, and but it's, yeah, we're in tough times at the moment.